Amazing. First of all, thank you so much for making the time to be at our panel today. I'm very excited to dive into this. I think the word UX has been talked about so much, so I'm curious what new insights we're going to learn of today. Um, Without further ado, my name is Alnura Belyalova. I'm a director of public relations at Input Global. We are a marketing agency that essentially makes sure that incredible founders and startups get the visibility that they deserve. And now I'd like to let the panelists introduce themselves. Francesco, let's start with you.
Sounds good. What's up, everyone? I'm Francesco. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm from MetaMask. I'm leading developer relation at Consensus. That's the umbrella company of MetaMask Linea, Infura. And yeah, I'm excited to speak everything about developers. I think trust is one of the most interesting panel that I've been on lately. I think we need more attestation. We need more specific verification system, especially on the KYC side. But I think I'm excited to speak more about that and join this wallet panelists. Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, we have quite a few competitors on the same stage. Nick?
Awesome. I'm Nick. I'm representing Trust Wallet. So I oversee BDs. So think about your on and off ramps, swaps, MEV infra security, all of these really cool topics that are picking up today. So yeah, again, I'm happy to be on this panel, and I want to thank everybody for your time to come here. I appreciate it. And to my fellow panelists.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Halil. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the Open Platform, which is a Web3 investment company and accelerator. So we actually have three companies which all operate wallets in our portfolio. And our focus is on building Telegram mini apps to make the best user experience for new users to crypto.
Hi guys, my name is Konstantin. I'm one of the co-founders of Pavis. We are a crypto fiat infrastructure provider. We have our own retail and business crypto wallet as well. And we are focusing also on on-ramps and off-ramps for the wallets, for example, that we have here. Our main mission and goal is to make it simple for the new people to get into crypto. So our goal is to help you guys bring the next 100 million people into Web3, right? So the main feature is to make it as simple as possible as any e-commerce application to get into crypto, as well as for retail customers and also for businesses. Because we all know, especially this year, more and more companies are getting into crypto, are getting into stablecoins. So it's not a question of when, but now it's a question of how to get crypto into your business processes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, making it simple for users to actually come into crypto leads me quite well into my first question. Right, UX. I'm going to take it back like maybe a few years ago. You know, I've moderated quite a few panels, and I remember the one word that always used to come up is interoperability. Every conference, every panel, everyone just was super excited about it. Yet, where are we with interoperability today? Where are we with that seamless user experience that could actually allow a more non-crypto person to easily come into crypto and actually stay in the industry? Halil, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. So we actually have two ways that you can make transfers. One is easier than the other, but the first is for new users to crypto. So our flagship product is called the Telegram Wallet, which is natively embedded into the Telegram Messenger. So our goal is to facilitate transfers between users on Telegram as easily as possible. So what you can actually do with the wallet is click the transfer button, choose a contact, choose your friend, select how much you want to send of any asset, be that USDT or Toncoin, Bitcoin, whatever you'd like, and make the transfer. It's actually that simple. How do we do that? Is by making the wallet actually custodial. So whenever you make a transfer using the crypto wallet, which is our custodial one, the transaction happens instantaneously just because this happens off-chain. And as soon as the user receives the asset, then they undergo a onboarding process and actually then get access to more assets, to different chains, whatever they'd like to do. So this is for initial onboarding, and this creates a viral effect because in order to send a transaction, you don't need to actually have a wallet beforehand, and you don't need to know any addresses or actually how crypto works. It works in the same way that you would use Revolut, for example. So this is a very simple way for us to onboard users and also educate them initially on how crypto works. However, we do understand that over time, people do want to have access to self-custody and hold their own keys. So we do have a self-custodial wallet as well, and they work hand in hand, where on the custodial side, everything is very simple. You have all the basic applications and basic cryptocurrencies. Whilst on the self-custodial side, that's where it's more open. You can actually sign transactions, you can hold NFTs and hold different cryptocurrencies. So there we actually also devised a method to make transfers. So how it works on the self-custody side is it's the exact same process, but the user on the other side has to click accept or reject the transaction. And if they click accept, then a smart contract that we wrote will release the funds and send it to the recipient. If they click reject, the smart contract will send the assets back. So this is in order to protect a user's privacy, because if we would allow the same seamless transactions as we have on the custodial side, then some users might get doxxed. So that's why we have this special method of an escrow account. But we prefer to start people off with the custodial wallet just because the transactions are free and instant, as opposed to on-chain, where there's always a fee, and it's very difficult to explain to a new crypto user why there is a gas fee, why does it take 6 seconds for the transaction to go through. So first we push the custodial wallet, and then we slowly introduce someone to the self-custodial side as well.
Thank you so much, Halil. And the second you mentioned, the easy way that we onboard users is through our custodial wallet. It kind of brought me to the main question that I think I've seen a lot of businesses try to tinker with. And Francesco, I'd like your input on this. A lot of the times, at least, it seems that self-custody, we all understand the benefits. You actually, your crypto, your keys, your crypto. But at the same time, when it comes to user experience, it seems that with self-custody, it's still incredibly big challenge. What do you think? Is this how it's going to remain long term? Self-custody, it brings its own benefits, but it will never become the mainstream option.
I think this is a good question, right? And I think we need to satisfy different spectrum of users, right? You have obviously people coming from different ecosystem, people being kind of Web3 native. I mean, we satisfy different needs means also trying to onboard on different kind of type of journeys, right? And I mean, we're working on different things. We launch obviously the smart account side. You can now, sign up with SSO and social logins. I think everybody saw the acquisition on the Web3 auth side. But I think also onboarding on Web3 or on a self-custodial wallet is not just the onboarding itself. It's also how to spend, how to obviously as you mentioned, cross-chain interoperability around different ecosystem, and I think obviously on ramping, right? I think it's still a big part of the game, also on ramping of centralized exchanges and moving gradually on chain. There is no kind of only journey that we start and we'll end up fully on chain, right? I think it's kind of a development journey, how you start using assets and you start to interact with different use cases, right? It's like going into DeFi, right? You never go 100% on different sub-products, right? You start actually your staking journey, then you start to actually doing some borrowing loans, and then play with actually more under product. So I think satisfying different needs is what our responsibility is for a wallet, but also having the users always transparently knowing what they're doing and satisfying those needs, right? I think we tested out a lot with the MetaMask snaps during those years. That's why the entire interoperability snaps has been also covered natively. 8 months ago, we started implementing natively Solana. A lot more are coming. I'm excited about this week, with Breakpoint happening. A lot of ecosystem partners are also present. And I think there are different journeys, right? There is on-ramping, there is also how to use, how to interact with different chains, and there is also the big part is off-ramping. I think it's one of the biggest use cases that we're not speaking enough. And the other part is obviously stablecoin. The majority of use case that actually find PMF is stablecoin usage, and I'm excited with everything MetaMask stablecoin that we are offering. And the card side on the off-ramping side that is actually giving an opportunity for self-custodial assets to be off-ramped. Yeah, that's very exciting.
Thank you so much for that input. Specifically, how you mentioned, I like that it's not just the onboarding part, right? It's the second the user is in, what happens next? How do they actually transact? How does that process works? Learning from the Web 2 world, making spending and e-commerce as frictionless as possible has been sort of like the goal. Like we've all heard incredible case studies of Amazon where, like it's one click and it's just at your door within a few hours.
Maybe I want to give you an example because, for example, like MetaMask, everybody kind of like grew up with like bridge and swaps, right? Two different bottoms, and I don't know if you saw it, like, but this year we merged the two bottoms in one, right? There is no difference between bridging or swapping. I was at the beginning very kind of like critical about this decision, right? A lot of, especially Web3 natives, was like, hey, I want to understand what I'm doing, what I'm bridging, what I'm swapping. A lot of people come in the space, they didn't really care. They actually like appreciate the fact that was unified. And I think like those kind of mindset is like, we need to kind of detach from reality. We are building for users that are not in our ecosystem today. We are right now in a full crypto chamber. And I think like building for users that are coming out next, it's like 90% of actually UX and processes need to be completely like changed. I'm a big believer, for example, in the smart account side. The problem that I see is that we will start to see more and more fragmentation around smart accounts. Everybody's having, I don't know how many of you have dApps on your phone, but every time you have a smart account on top that you need to fund. That's why I'm looking a lot around solutions like Omni accounts, kind of like truly interoperable accounts, right? In the same time, we can't have multiple ecosystems to kind of like split attention around users. I think this is also like very bad. And I'm following a lot developer ecosystem and shifts around developer ecosystem inflow and outflow. And I think this is also one of the biggest fragmentation there is today. But I think tooling are getting better out there.
Interesting point there. How you mentioned that, at the moment, especially at these incredible conferences, while we're seeing a lot of maybe institutions actually come in and have a conversation, we are largely operating within this interesting silo. It's crypto natives, it's people that have been in the industry for quite a while. How do we get to know the mainstream user that might actually be interested to get into crypto? And that leads me to the question about privacy, because in the Web2 world, the most customized experience is the most frictionless one. But the only way to make it possible is we get the big conglomerates learning absolutely everything and anything about us, from where we were born to what are we thinking to spend tomorrow, even before we realize it ourselves. Konstantin, I want to kind of direct that question to you, because you mentioned at the beginning you are here, to actually help wallets, self-custodial wallets, to bring this, next wave of users on board. In your view, how do you balance, this need for knowing your user well, at the same time catering to this, demand for privacy?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, what we are trying to do, we're looking at e-commerce industry, which is there for many years, right? We all have experience buying things online. We bought online for like last 40, 50 years, more or less. So it's a kind of not so difficult for you to go online and buy shoes. You know how to do it. Everybody knows how to do it. Even your grandma knows how to do it, right? So we have been trying to think the same approach, how we can apply the same approach for crypto. So when the first time person or first time user comes to any wallet out there, right, they want to figure out how to get in. So typically for a human being, when you try something new, the first step is the most difficult. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to apply already the existing technology from e-commerce to crypto. And one example is Apple Pay Express checkout, right? So we all, for example, have experienced when we want to buy a present or something on some Shopify website, you put something to your cart, you click Apple Pay, it gets all the information about you from Apple Pay, like your first name, last name, email, billing, shipping, and the rest, whatever, everything they need. And voila, right? You have your order waiting for delivery. So we apply the same approach for crypto, right? For example, you come to a new wallet, if they implement this feature, right, you can immediately say, okay, I want to try, somebody heard about Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, whatever it is. I want to try to get my first crypto. Maybe I want to put 50 bucks, 100 bucks, 200 euros just to try it out. So the first experience is the most important. It's defining if person is coming back, if he's maybe his first experience with this specific wallet is too difficult, he's going to something else, Googling, talking to ChatGPT. But as soon as he found something he trusts and he wants to try on, So the first experience should be as smooth as possible, right? So with, for example, this feature that we are doing and some of our competitors as well, that the customer basically checks out buys his first crypto using Apple Pay in like 1 minute without KYC, without providing any personal information. We get everything from Apple Pay, from Apple, for example, because they just aggregate the personal data, not your ID documents, but just basic information. It is good enough to do the basic due diligence because we're still a regulated exchange. We still have to follow regulations. This information is enough to check, to do the basic checks like PEP and sanctions, for example. And then if payment goes through, we send the crypto to the customer's wallet immediately. So in 1 minute, literally, you can get your first crypto. The customer will be impressed. He will feel much safer that the money is not lost, and he will continue to explore the Web3 ecosystem. So everything starts with getting, his first crypto, and then they will continue. At some point, they will go through KYC, but they will already understand. Okay, I've been there, I've done that, it works. Okay, now you have to explain to them why KYC is needed, and so on and so on, so they're not afraid. But what we see from our wallet, for example, in our wallet, we are targeting. We have a custodian wallet, and we're targeting mainly the new people in the space. So we're trying to focusing specifically on Web2 people who are interested in crypto. They go through us, they get onboarded quite quickly. It's super easy for them. We don't have so many advanced features like other guys. And then when they explore the ecosystem, then they start to wonder, okay, what can I do more? Right? I can get a card, I can do yield, I can do staking, swapping, explore different ecosystem. But the first step is the most important one. So everybody is experts in what they're doing. So we are trying to be expert in this first stage of crypto journey of the new people.
Very interesting, and I like the point of you saying that like once a person is interested to get into crypto, they have to go and find how can they actually get into the space, and at the moment I think that's the curious part. A lot of people that do enter crypto enter hugely because of wanting to trade and actually try to make a little bit of money. I think we've all heard of incredible stories of people doing 10x 100x. So it's still the exchanges that have kind of unlocked a great business model, a great demand. But I guess the question now is, and Nick, I want you to answer that one. Will we continue, seeing the interest in crypto purely from the trading perspective, or will we ever get to see, the email moment of crypto, of Web3, where people are using blockchain, they are using crypto without necessarily even knowing so, but it just makes their life easier?
Yeah, I think in this instance, one of the most interesting cases is really prediction markets. If you've been looking around recently, they're kind of all the hype at the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. But particularly what's interesting is people are betting on, the Fed, will it cut the BIPS rate, or who's going to win the next presidential election. And this is where you kind of see a blockchain being used for almost a social purpose. Obviously, there's still the monetary benefit, right? People want to make a bet one way or another, and they want to see if they're going to win or not because there's a monetary outcome, right? But it's also really indicating for people to see, do they think the Fed's going to cut rates? Well, you can see with like 90, 95, 99% accuracy that the people that are making these predictions are actually lining up with what's going to happen, because it's a truly decentralized vote. There's no like double counting. There's no one people just spamming the system, because you have to have real money to put up there. So I think this is really interesting to see it as a social aspect. It's getting beyond just the fee. I think for most wallets, that's still the main source of revenue, right? I mean, I would love to see where it isn't, but I mean, think about your traditional bank. How are they making money? It's still fees to the end user, which is never great, because even like I speak with a lot of people and they say, Nick, why are the Tron gas fees so high? And I would be like, I know, I hate it. How can we solve this problem? And they say, oh, Tron Energy. But then it's such an educational standpoint, like how you take your Tron, you stake it, and then you receive the energy so then you can use it for a transaction. But that whole level of nonsense and complexity just kills the user's vibe. So I mean, there's a certain level of how do you make something introductory enough so that people can use it at a broad level, but at the same time, you want it to be useful enough that people aren't just spamming it with random information. Like if transactions were free on a blockchain, you would just see so many every single day that it would be impossible to get anything to land. Same thing on prediction markets. If it was free, then it would just be like a Twitter space where it's just people's opinions with no real ground on it. So I think you have to find the right balance where you strike, is this an opportunity for everybody, that everyone has the opportunity, right? But at the same time, you don't want to make it just take hands off the rails, let everyone fly with it, and then just have it become a spam system where you have a lot of memes or targeted stuff or things you wouldn't want in a system, right? But again, it's a blockchain, so these are things that can't be erased once they're written to the block. So you have to be very careful with what you're kind of allowing to proceed. Not that I'm positioning for censorship or anything like that, but at the same time, making sure that the users have the right choice and they make the right choice, and they're not, led into scams and all of these other things as well.
You see already happening with like agent to agent, kind of like washing trading or something. Agent paying each other because it's so cheap. They just start trying to kind of like farm other words, right?
Yeah.
So interesting.
There was also a really interesting one. I remember you guys saw the largest hack with Ethereum, one of the exchanges recently. What we saw a lot of was people trying to launder money through decentralized DEXs because they obviously don't have the KYC, and this is a beautiful thing for hackers. But one of the interesting things is once you kind of steal a bunch of money, the wallet address gets flagged, and then all of these kind of security vendors are going to blacklist this address, right? But what they started doing, I saw, is on Pump.Fun, they would make a token with another random wallet and then use the stolen funds to buy up the token so that the other wallets could sell off and you can launder this money, which I thought was a crazy use case for like Pump.Fun or something of that nature. But it's not something we've seen before until we've kind of got to this point where people are now able to block these wallets that have mass amounts of stolen funds. Again, you still see some money moving on some of the smaller exchanges, and there's no 100% solution, right? Because at the end of the day, it's blockchain. It's supposed to be the freedom of financial money, but at the same time, you don't want hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of stolen funds to get entered into an ecosystem. That's never good for business, and it's not good for adoption. It doesn't help our case with regulators.
The level of creativity within sort of nefarious actors is probably one to top. But you mentioned an interesting point of prediction markets are a great use case where people have come on because the actual experience was interesting enough, and blockchain was just there to facilitate that experience in the best possible way. Yet it still feels that I'm curious to hear, Francesco, from the wallet perspective, right? We are still trying to kind of attract users to come and try to be, interested enough, curious enough to download a wallet and understand how it works. With the rise of embedded finance, right? Of the rise of, the likes of Elon Musk trying to create super apps, meeting users where they are instead of trying to get them to download yet another app, yet another wallet. Where are we in that process? Do you think the answer to the true sort of like mass adoption will be when we'll have this miracle super app actually, take shape, or it should come through, users coming on board and making a choice for the wallet that they want?
I mean, you're saying meet users where they are, right? And I think every market we see obviously a big shift. I think especially this market, we saw a big shift in terms of distribution timings and distribution types. And I think meeting user where they are is not just onboarding new user, but is actually onboarding vendors and people that are actually providing the service for consumers. I think this is really key, right? And I think we are criticizing a bit, that's really crypto Twitter stuff. We're criticizing a little bit all the tempos and people building new layer one. But I mean, people that have right now distribution are actually meeting the user where they are. So I think key here is actually working with vendors and providers together to actually make and simplify those user experiences to onboard users completely frictionless, right? An example could be a Shopify integration, a Stripe stablecoin integration, right? I think those kind of use cases where providers actually have already distribution and consumers will not change that much their let's say consumer and spending journeys. I think this is really key here to understand. I think we've been trying also to educate a lot how to onboard into new journeys. But one key fact is that changing kind of users and consumer philosophy, how to spend and how to actually trade and do things is not really seen as big change. I'm speaking about masses consumers, right? So I think key here is this is a distribution game, and distribution is done through vendors. And I think this market specifically is played more on actually vendor outreach and vendor relationships.
It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned a key word again that I think gets attention over and over again, which is education. And to your point, it's not only the B2C type of education; it's B2B as well. Like, how can you build with the Web2 vendors to actually create an infrastructure for that end user? But Halil, my next question is to you, because when we talk about education, I think security always comes to mind. I mean, Nick already mentioned what crypto sometimes is famous for, unfortunately, is not being 100% legit. And I think for a non-crypto user, for a novice, the big headlines of crypto scams are still very much a big sort of like scare away from ever touching the space, the assets. It's interesting because again, you mentioned you've got the self-custodial and the custodial side. How do you treat security, education on security, and from the technical perspective when it comes to self-custody and centralized custody?
So unfortunately today, the biggest risk to the user is the user himself or herself, because it's very easy to fall into a trap, especially if you're a new user to crypto. So for us, there are two things that we really push to try to protect the user as much as possible. The first is the passcode. So in order to make any transaction at all from the wallet, you do need to either scan your face, Touch ID, or input a numerical passcode. And this means that every time, for example, if someone takes your Telegram and opens your wallet, they won't actually be able to do anything with it because they don't know your passcode. So this is really important because even if you lose access to your Telegram account, your funds will stay safe. You can write us an email, and the entire wallet will just get frozen at that point. And you'll be able to recover it because you have passed KYC. The second part is on the self-custody side. So there we have really strong safeguards on which apps someone can actually interact with. There are a lot of vendors out there actually who can emulate and simulate transactions before they happen, which allows us to detect which transactions are actually in the benefit of the user and what they intended versus which ones are malicious. So by checking the transaction before it even happens, we are able to protect people on the self-custody side. And by protecting essentially your Telegram account, we protect people on the custodial wallet side.
Interesting. So it's interesting to hear the sort of the different, let's say, sort of attitude and like user experience thinking that you need to have self-custody versus centralized custody. And I mean, it's already been mentioned by all the panelists here, the topic of KYC. Konstantin, my next question is to you, and that is, we've all, again, coming back to the issues that we see in the Web2 world, it's the fact that the big companies and conglomerates have way too much information about the customer. Whereas in the Web3 space, we are trying to persuade the users to give the absolute basic information possible. In your view, in the long run, will this sort of like, KYC processing, collecting any information on users, would that stay again with centralized entities in the Web3 space, or will we see, the use of zero knowledge or any other tech that essentially makes sure that users still are the true owners of their own data?
Yeah, I think right now all the players in the industry, in the regulated part of the industry, so to say, they have to obey the regulations around the world. And that's why, I mean, KYC is needed in the main place, right? Because regulations, even if we think, especially like crypto agents think it's bad, I mean, regulations actually help crypto adoption, right? Because 5 years ago, there was much less trust in crypto in general before a lot of regulations took place. The main goal of regulation is consumer rights protection. So when people interact and get goods or services, they know that they are interacting with a regulated entity and they will get the result, or they can go and complain to some government body. Of course, crypto has a completely different idea in the beginning, but I think what you are saying, it might happen in the next 5 years, but the companies who are building on blockchain, and we briefly talked before the panel about on-chain KYC, for example, there is already something happening, for example, with attestation services, like SumSup is doing attestation service prototypes with Solana, with Linea, but this is just the first step, right? So technically now you can have a proof of a real person on the blockchain, right? Which allows ecosystem players to make a different logic on their side, so they know this wallet belongs to a real person. You can give airdrops, you can do additional perks, you know how many real people you have on the network and so on. But I think the next level for that will be the storage of personal information. Because, for example, even if we even if we will deal with this customer who have done zero-knowledge proof attestation on the blockchain, right? We need to get the personal data from somewhere, because this is our obligation to the regulator, that we need to get the data, we need to double check it again, and so on and so on. So it will take time for technology to be built to facilitate that, and then the companies like us, we have to go and explain this to the regulators, and we have to convince them that this could be an alternative to centralized KYC providers. And for example, we as a regulated entity, we have to prove that we are doing this KYC to the regulator, right? So we need to convince them that, guys, if there is a KYC on the blockchain, has the same legitimacy as KYC that we are doing, for example, it will take time. So ultimately, I see already some projects are going that direction, and a lot of projects are trying to do KYC on chain. But I think it will take maybe another 5 years until we get there. But ultimately, I hope this is what's going to happen. You do KYC once on blockchain on any, let's say, L1 or L2, and then it can be shared all across the ecosystems and all across other chains. So then the people don't have to do repeated KYC all over the place, because there is also a risk, right? You can even lose your personal information by doing a fake KYC on a, let's say, scammer's website who can steal your identity. So this implies, then if we do this, let's say in 5 years, we will achieve two goals. One, we will stay compliant and help the crypto adoption. Second, we will keep the customer data safe as well.
The one point that you mentioned that I want to expand on a little bit, doing KYC once, or kind of like getting into crypto one time, and essentially, you have access across blockchains, across apps, across dApps. I mean, that's kind of the dream, a version of user experience. And Nick, my question is to you. We started with the word interoperability a few years back. One of the key hurdles that I've heard from a lot of the great experts is common standards. It's just there is none at the moment, and every company is building the way that they think is best. So my question is, do we need common standards? Is that the only way to create sort of interoperability within ecosystem? And if it is, will it ever happen?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a loaded question, because if you think about technology cycles, right? So as you saw the internet come up and computers, there were different types of operating systems, right? You had all these different types of computers that were competing and they were non-compatible. In a capitalistic market, eventually you have a few players that kind of just win the battle, right? You have your Apple, you have your Windows, you have your Linux. I think the same thing is going to be coming to crypto. It's only a matter of time. I don't think we need like 10,000 stablecoins. Like that's too much fragmented liquidity.
Right now, it seems like we're on the way to 10,000
exactly.
stablecoins.
I think I see a news article every day that somebody launched a stablecoin, and I think it's great and all, but I do think we need to kind of narrow it down, like you said, a common standard. The biggest things I try to speak about with our team is right now we're in that hybrid period. It's kind of like when the Mac released the M1 and they had gone from x86 to ARM. So there was a lot of this inoperability because people couldn't use certain softwares. It's the same thing, because right now you might have USDC on Ethereum, but you're trying to place a prediction on Polymarket and you need it on Polygon. Like this application does not exist on chain, right? If you use, your Coinbase, your Binance, whatever, you just have a USDC balance and you can send any kind of chain you want. That's something we're trying to mimic ourselves. We've kind of introduced our cross-chain send product. So you just put in the wallet address and then you can choose whatever chain you want and we'll swap it before it even gets to where you're trying to go, right? So there's some kind of like hacky solutions to this at the moment. Until such time, I think the market either just kills off everything that isn't relevant, or a regulator steps in and says like, this is gonna be the gold standard, kind of like in the EU where they said USB-C is the charger, everything else has to go. I think until we hit one of those pivotal moments, we're going to be in this kind of hybrid period where there are multiple solutions, but none of them are perfect solutions, right? Because everybody has a solution. They just want their solution. And until we get away from this mindset of my solution is the best solution, it's going to be up to the end user, right? People have to vote with their dollars. What do people want? Where is the money going? And then people will build for those, right? there's two major app stores. You got the Apple Pay, Google Play stores. It's not because they did it better than anybody else. It's just because that's where all the users went, and that's when they decided we're going to be the biggest on the market, and then you have a limited market fragmentation. I think the same thing is going to happen in blockchain. It's just a matter of when, obviously. If I could tell you, then I don't think I'd be up here today. I'd be retired on a yacht somewhere. But I like to think that it's coming soon.
So
I think I disagree actually here. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I love the
with
disagreement,
Nick.
please.
Just saying, like, yeah, there's 10,000 stablecoins out there. I agree. If they were all 10,000, they were all the same, like USDT 1, 2, 3, that would be bad. But I think all of them have their own use case. So you have USDT, which is the known, the biggest, the most trusted. People use it for P2P transfers. People use it to save in the emerging markets. That one makes the most sense, and that one is the most universal. So inside of our Telegram wallet, we do display a dollars balance, and that is held completely in USDT because it has this universal factor. However, something like USDC is also very useful on the payment rails side. This is something that they have really focused on, and I think that they have a reason to exist because of this use case. USDE has their own, let's say, protocol, which allows you to gain rewards for holding USDE. Again, it has its own reason to exist. So I think as long as each of these separate stablecoins have their own niche or their own strong point, then it's fine to have that many, as long as it's still easy to swap between them. So for example, with USDT, USDE, there is most of the exchanges have very deep liquidity pools for the swap, and it basically costs 10 bips, or if not less, to swap between these assets. So as long as that's actually possible, then I think the user experience doesn't suffer so much. At least how we do it on our side is the USDT is the main balance. However, we do have an earn section, and there we actually have USDE. And when you deposit to this earn section, then we automatically convert it into from USDT to USDE for the user. And when you withdraw out of the earn back to your main balance, we convert it back into USDT. So we do this all on our side. The user doesn't have to deal with switching from one stable to another, and therefore the user experience is actually very good. So as long as they're interoperable and the pairs are liquid, and they all have their own strong points, then I think it's fine if we have many different stablecoins, just as we have many different currencies. Also, just one point on the security side, we have in the third row Chain Patrol, who is a very good provider for transactions. So they do monitoring of transactions and verifying if transactions are scams or not. So when I was saying vendors, actually, this is a very good one.
Just a friendly plug-in during one's panel.
We don't actually use Chain Patrol, but but they are a very good one.
Noted. It's interesting that like the topic of regulation keeps on coming up, and Francesca, I want to give that to you. From what I'm hearing, a lot of the times, what regulators want and what the on-chain experience are two absolute sort of like opposites, right? If you want to satisfy the regulator, you have to be somewhat centralized, but to bring that true on-chain, experience that a lot of the, us crypto Web3 OGs want, you have to go a completely different direction. Is there a balance, or do we have to compromise, that on-chain part for the sake of mass adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not definitely like an expert on the regulation side, but I also like want to point out I'm definitely in the middle here around stablecoin, and probably is the same kind of answer, right? My answer is like, we are always speaking about kind of like technology and product fit. I think like what we need to speak more about is actually like distribution and where actually like the user are interacting with which vendor today, right? Like, for example, around the stablecoin fragmentation is a great kind of like discussion, right? But at the end, if consumers, I don't know, I give you an example, right? We were in Kenya for eSafari. People are accustomed to like, I don't know, Safari Pay or a different kind of provider. Those providers are supporting these specific stablecoins. Like, the specific consumer don't really like kind of care which stablecoin are supported. They just see which stablecoin is supported and we're actually on board with that. So I think like the education and the adoption is coming on the provider side, right? We will have fragmentation. We will have, specific use case being adopted by specific like stablecoin. But at the end, what will be decided is how also like user will interact with those vendors and which vendor will adopt like which stable, for example, right? So things are not really going away, and I think it's always like a balance because technology always moving forward faster, but the reality is also kicked in, right? Is maybe 2 or 3 panels that I had in DevConnect was about, do we need to actually like start to think about trade-off around cyberpunk values versus actually like credible and tangible, resilient adoption. I mean, every market, I'm reacting really different. And this market for me is very specific that we need to start to think about trade-off. And if you were speaking with me like 8 years ago, I was the most cyberpunk aligned person. But I think, we need to live with reality. We need to also have institutional components and modules, especially on the layer 2 side. And there is no way that we cannot compromise. And we already see that, right? I think it's huge that this market we're seeing institutional adoption. We see definitely like regulators coming in harder. I think it's also healthy because we want to build resilient ecosystem. Like the reason why we are here today is also because there is a lot of support from different stakeholders, and stakeholders are not just product builders or consumer, but bigger stakeholders.
Makes sense. And I mean, we are coming to the end of this really interesting path. And I want to close it off to sort of a question to all the panelists. Konstantin, we'll start with you. Francesco mentioned a good word, trade-off. There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of problems to solve. But if there was one problem, one challenge that you could magically fix in 2026, when it comes to that future of on-chain interaction, what would it be?
Well, since we are obviously more focusing on the payment side of things, I think the biggest challenge for us is integration with traditional finance, right? Because, for example, in order for us to guarantee a good approval rates on credit cards, we need to integrate like 6 credit card providers, acquirers, who would have a crazy logic and so on. Think about fraud. I mean, it's quite a complicated stuff, but still, a lot of customers, for example, suffer with the problem that they're trying to pay, and their bank just blocks the transaction. Still, they don't like crypto. So in e-commerce, for example, the success rates for payments is around like 95%. In crypto, 70% is already amazing. So I would want to solve that problem in the future. So e-commerce transactions and crypto transactions would be the same in terms of easy, like how easy you can actually do it technically, because then it would be much more. Again, we will help with adoption as well.
Makes sense. Integration with TradFi. Halil, what is your main pain point?
We want crypto to be the future of finance. However, we know how easy it is to make a transaction using a neobank. We are not there yet on the crypto side. So for me, I think the most important is for anyone not in this audience, but actually outside this room, to understand that making a crypto transaction is just as easy as making a neobank transfer. So this is working on the speed, the gas fees, and all the clunky aspects that come up during this process. So either the signing of the transaction or the address or how do I actually store my seed phrase. So all of these things have to be solved and work perfectly before we can actually say as an industry that we're ready for the next 100 or 1 billion users.
So to bring that frictionless user experience. Nick, what's yours?
I think for us, I would say security. I think it's in the name, trust. I think the fine line is what do you block versus what do you allow. For example, we get a lot of user tickets where someone is given a seed phrase and they put it in, then they move money in, and then they wake up the next day and all the money's gone. Now, as a wallet, we could say, hey, you're trying to import a wallet with 0 balance. I'm not going to let you do that because I'm trying to protect you. But at the same time, if the self-custody doesn't allow you to do what you want with your own money, then what's the point of moving money off a centralized exchange? At the same point, like I could block all dApps, and then I can only whitelist ones that I find that are good. Like I could pull an Apple, right? We can do the same thing with the App Store, but I don't think that's true financial freedom, and I think that goes against the idea of self-custody. So if I could wave a magic wand today, I would love to see security be solved in an elegant solution that doesn't eliminate user choice, but again, it's an imperfect world, but that would be my choice.
Integration with traditional finance, frictionless user experience, security. Francesco, what would be the fourth pain point we'd love to see fixed in 2026?
Oof. I mean, I will double down on integration with can I say, Web2 solution, right? I think distribution is what matters the most right now, especially in those vibe coding area, and we need to actually like welcome more, provider already having this distribution, because we need to meet consumer where they are, instead actually like trying to all like educate like the majority of people. Majority of people will stay and they will interact with let's say with normal use case, right? And underneath you have Web3 Rails, but upper you will actually have the same use case.
Amazing. Well, I'll just ask the audience for a round of applause to the panelists today for a great conversation that we had. Do want to connect with them. Make sure you take note of the companies and the names right here on the stage. Other than that,
Thank you
thank you
for
everyone.
amazing panel.
You're
Thanks for
absolutely
holding.
welcome.